So we're going to take a few minutes. I thought about, as we normally do, I have a text that I've taken for years, and I was thinking about, we think in terms of past and present and future, but we think human, we think fleshly. So I was looking at a verse this week, and the verse that said, one day with the Lord is 1,000 years is one day, and all that, and among other things, that teaches that with Him, time is not like it is with us. And that's the main thrust of that verse. Many have debated for years past, you saw this and all that, and it said, one day with the Lord is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is one day, and that has reference to time. I thought about talking about the past and the present and the future, and I thought about that. That's the way we look at things. You need to realize that the things that determines all things are God. He determines all those things, so that's the way it's going to be. I thought, well, we'll talk about what man's going to do. Well, man predicted today we're going to have snow and ice and 28 degrees and all that. Well, it didn't happen. It may happen tomorrow, but it didn't happen today, so somebody missed it. So, where's the verse I look for? Let me begin with 1 Corinthians. We'll go a little different way this year. The text I generally take is forgetting those things which are behind. That's the text, and I preached it. That's how I got saved for 20 years. But you know what? It's only now that I'm beginning to forget those things which are behind. I didn't really have the full import of that verse. Forgetting those things which are behind. And Paul said, reaching forward. So, we'll not take that. So for a few minutes, turn to 1 Corinthians 3. Even this text is new. If any man be in Christ, all things are made new. Paul talking to the Corinthian church here in chapter 3. And this is an old text. If you want a New Year's resolution, I would say one thing to you. If you want a New Year's resolution, or if you think about making new ways, I know about reading the Scriptures. Why don't you make a resolution to read the Scriptures more this year? If you want one, read a verse tonight. You know, let me give you a secret of going to bed and going to sleep. Listen to a tape, read a chapter before you go to bed and go to sleep. It works. It works. We'll read everything but the Scriptures. We'll read everything else. We'll read the news. No one grabs the newspaper any quicker than I do. But we'll read everything but that. Paul said in 1 Corinthians, in the 3rd chapter, he's beginning with verse 10. He said, according to the grace of God, which is given unto me as a wise master builder, I've laid the foundation. Now, Paul certainly didn't mean he laid the foundation, but means that the foundation that he laid in his preaching and in the preaching of the gospel, he laid a foundation. And another buildeth thereon. Now he said, but let every man take heed how he builds thereon. So it looks as though there's something to do or something we can do. He said, for other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. So there would be a conflict with verse 10, if you look at it in that sense. For he said, I've laid the foundation. Here he says, for other foundation can no man lay than that is laid, which is Jesus Christ. So the problem was this. A lot of places, it's not the foundation. We disagree with a lot of folks. Paul said that the foundation is Christ. It is. Now I know many who say, that you have to be born again and see the kingdom of God, and all that, and that it's spiritually perceived or seen, and like that. That's not the problem. The problem is building on the foundation. That's where we have a difference. The Galatian church, they said, well, they got back under law, legalism. And how prevalent that is today. How prevalent that is with us. Reason, but we're still in the flesh. And we want to think in fleshly terms. I want to look at the Scriptures in fleshly terms. I was thinking about that word heaven in the passage you was reading there. Prior to that, it said there was heavens. And I read a thing this week on, he said there, man said there was war in heaven. You mean to say, and he said it's going to come yet, you mean to say that up in the abode of God, around the throne of God, whatever that is, that Satan is going to walk around the throne of God where the saints dwell, and there's going to be war up there? Do you know what God would have to do to destroy Satan? Just speak. You mean there's going to be swords drawn up there? And I thought, how ridiculous. I don't care how many DDs and LLDs after anybody's name. That doesn't plus or minus me one bit. War in heaven where God dwells? Around the throne of God? And we're told to have our faith in the power of God? And yet there's going to be a battle fought up there? Think about it. War in heaven? Brother, if it's possible to have been war in heaven, it would have happened long before now. Satan would have led a rebellion up there a long time ago if he could have done it. If he can go into the throne of God and cause a war, then he can do a lot of things. But he can't. They'll say, well, he's not bound, he's not bound, he's not bound. Jesus said, now is the judgment of this world, and he said, now is the prince of the power of the air. Now is he what? Cast out. Is that what war in heaven means? I was sitting there thinking while John was speaking. That was a prior verse, what he was reading on. You mean to say there's going to be war up there? Come on. I'll go further. He also said, they changed the position a little bit. I'm rambling now. I'm off on the things I've out. I wouldn't get off on. That glorified bodies on this earth, living on this earth, are going to bear children, and their children is going to lead to rebellion at the last, when Satan comes back to destroy the earth. The children of those that are standing in glorified bodies. Come on, again. Paul said, for other foundation can no man lay, and I'm going back to the foundation. Now, if any man build upon this foundation, I'm just going to take a few minutes, gold, silver, precious stones, wood, hay, or stubble. Every man's work shall be made manifest, for the day shall declare it. Now, gold, silver, precious stones. Well, let's go back to the foundation. Turn to Isaiah 28. I'm only going to read one verse, and then we're going to close down. Go back to Isaiah 28 and just read a minute or two, and then I'm going to close. We find a verse here that says, verse 16, therefore thus saith the Lord God, behold, I lay in Zion for a foundation, a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone, a sure foundation, and he that believeth shall not make haste or ever be forced to flee. He that believeth shall not make haste. Now you can understand that. But let's read verse 15. Because ye have said, we have made a covenant with death, and that's legalism, that's law. And with hell are we in agreement. Now I'm not talking about folks out here walking up and driving up down the road and walking on the streets. I'm not talking about them. Here's some people that's made a covenant with death. They made a covenant with death. Here's death, and they made a covenant with death. And with hell are we in agreement. Is anybody here in agreement with hell? Have we made a covenant with death? Man said the other day, he said, I follow the 10 Commandments. He's made an agreement with death. God said, Elijah, it's time for you to go. He said, I want you to go over there, and I'll take you. You know what Elijah did? He headed for Mount Sinai just as hard as he could go. He said, I want to die there. Twice, God stopped him and said to him, said, Elijah, what are you doing here? He wouldn't take him there, John. Elijah had to turn around and go back over into the plains where Joshua led him. He said, I'll take you from there. I'm talking about a foundation. We've made a covenant with death. I'm going to keep the 10 Commandments. There was only one who ever kept them. He said that the righteousness of the law might be fulfilled in us, not by us. And with hell are we in agreement. You know, most of them that are in agreement with hell don't even know it. How blessed and thankful we ought to be that we could at least see that. I'm talking about laying a foundation. When the overflowing scourge shall pass through, it shall not come unto us. For we've made lies our refuge. And let me go back to what I read yesterday. The man said that there was going to be war up there where God sits on the throne. Jesus plainly said, it's finished. We got a new year, but we've got the same old gospel for the new year that we had last year. And it'll get sweeter to your taste as you get older. The only difference between us here, it's not age. It's just years of looking at it and experiences, that's all. You'll have the same experiences. And some of you still sitting here when you're my age, you have the same experience. Some of you are far beyond me now. That's not what it is. Said we've made lies our refuge. What do you mean? Well, that's the fellow that drinks and curses and swears. That's not him. He ain't talking about him, John. If that fellow says by your free will, you're not even here this morning by your free will. Now David's here because of Della. But I'm making a point. That's not free will. But you know, David, and I'm not trying to be used, but you know my first experience ever being going to church, quote unquote, was I could walk down the street with a young girl who went in what I thought was church. And that was the only way I could see her, was walk down that street to church. And she was sneaking out and I was too. But that was just as determined and planned as it could be. That was my first experience. You know? It's determined and fixed and settled as you being here today. That was all fixed, settled and determined. For we've made lies our refuge, and under falsehood have we hid ourselves. Don't they? Therefore, thus saith the Lord, I lay in Zion for a foundation, a stone, a tried stone, a precious cornerstone. He that believes on me shall not make it. Now watch verse 17. Judgment also will I lay to the line. This is going to be bigger than my text. I'm just going to use that for my text. Judgment also will I lay to the line, and righteousness to the plummet. There's two things there. Mike worked with his hands. Johnny worked with his hands. David worked with his hands. Ken did, you did. Both of you know, all of you know what a line is and a plummet is, don't you? Put a line on that wall, drop it down to see if that wall's straight. You fellows all know what it is. You work with straight lines every day. God said, judgment will I lay to the line, and righteousness to the plummet. You know what he's doing there? He's bringing the law to our attention. He said, here's the righteousness, and here's my righteousness. How do you stack up against it? That's what he's saying. Paul said when the commandment came, sin revived and I died. That's what he's saying. Righteousness is with him. And when some person goes out there and says, Lord, I will do, he's waving the filthy rags of his righteousness before God. And